Here you can stop the transmission or the uploading, but actually looks quite good, isn't it? Yeah, here we need Martin. You're on the street. Should see you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then when you know how to take pictures of this, just point and shoot. You can try. Just make sure it focuses on the thing you want to focus. You look through the.
Yeah, I saw it.
It focuses on the little square in the middle, so make sure that's what you want the focus to be on, and it'll do that. Oh, it doesn't matter, as many as you like, just to get the audience in the presentation. I'll do it while Lucas presenting, but when you come back, you're off to get the beer. I'll let you do that first.
Put it here.
Okay. It's just point and shoot. It's not difficult.
I'm off now.
Okay.
Have fun. Thanks a lot.
No, I'm not. I'm not a medical excuse. I just like to scan
But it will be much higher. It will not be for consumer. I will like it. This one, then with on.
Please charge it outside. Because we are going to add it. There's no charging point. But if you can sort out this bottom.
illegal powers.
So sad.
Yeah, it's also it's written there at the desk.
Why would I comment?
Use case on that use case. Don't I need this my friend, Jack passport have some for China, but they can do it from Singapore. Wow. The best place is going to fall out the nearest take flower only you just scan then you can pay recipient. Illegal lah. The illegal thing is a flower, not a barcode. Yeah, illegal hawker lah, but the barcode lah. The barcode is a personal gateway.
Can you see at the front? 6.
Kind of happy that you are starting to do that.
Just okay. I don't know. You haven't? Are you staying here tomorrow night? Or no?
That is free bus.
Just what I would. Otherwise, you have to stop and ask somebody every time.
You know, we just like rush down the class.
We don't need
Hello everyone. Good evening. Hi. This is my first talk in Singapore, and we are mighty thrilled to have so many of you come for our debut talk here. We're going to present some blockchain disruptions, which we think are going to be game changers. And we know that Singapore is a pioneering hub for blockchain, and many of the early innovations have originated from Singapore, and we know that the audience is very sophisticated. So we hope that we have something really groundbreaking and innovative for you to take away today. Just to give you a little bit of a background on me, my name is Arifa Khan. I live in London. We've been on a global tour. We just did a talk in Dubai the other day. We've just got here yesterday, and we are going onwards to Hong Kong tomorrow, and then in Beijing and Shanghai next week. And we go back to Europe, and we believe our products are really that need to be known by the community universally. So, in engineering, I studied in Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and then I majored in finance from the Wharton School of Business. I currently represent the Ethereum Foundation in India. We introduced Vitalik to India in 2016. We again did a lot of hackathons this year when Vitalik was there this summer. I also advised the state of Andhra Pradesh government and the chief minister in particular. And Andhra Pradesh is again one of the blockchain pioneers, and they have coordinated something with the government of Singapore and NAS, and they're taking some early steps in payments innovation. That's my background. And I'm also an ex-investment banker. I spent a few years with Credit Suisse and UBS doing financial sponsors, leveraged buyouts, and capital markets. So that's Vitalik in India. Unfortunately, he's not in Singapore today. Okay. Let's start with the inefficiencies in global capital markets. So if you look at neoclassical theory of economics, it predicts that countries with higher productivity growth should be enjoying new net capital inflows. However, evidence points to the contrary. in what is known as the allocation puzzle by researchers. This has been researched substantially. So, what is the reason behind this allocation puzzle and allocation paradox? As you can see here, these are the developing countries on the top, and these are the developed nations at the bottom. So, despite the household savings being excessive in emerging economies like Asia, for example, China has a very high household savings rate. Despite the savings rate being very excessive, the enterprises in emerging economies do not have access to capital at the same rate. They have to pay excessive rate for capital because the rate of return on capital is very high because of scarcity, and these household savings flow to developed countries, which actually do not need the savings law. And that is so because the financial markets are extremely sophisticated here. And as you have witnessed in stock market shocks, every time there is a stock market shock, you see a huge capital shift, huge capital flowing out from countries to the developed nations. And then when the capital comes here, you have a lot of capital waiting to be invested in fixed capital, that is enterprises needing capital investment like plants, manufacturing capacity, R&D and so on. And then this capital moves back to emerging countries. So there's a lot of inefficiency here because capital that could have easily been accessed by the enterprises is not accessible. So a lot of reasons. One is conflicts of interest, and there are heterogeneous degrees of development, financial development between countries because of various macroeconomic factors. There's heterogeneous savings rate because of demographics and cultural behavioral factors. And there are lots of idiosyncratic risks, and countries also differ in accessibility to credit and various other financial markets. So to prevent this, what do we need? We really need an efficient capital market system, access from anywhere to anywhere. Okay? So right now we are at the mercy of institutions like banks and other capital markets institutions, which in our view fail in their fiduciary duty. For example, if you take commercial banks in India, to a lot of household savings, pension funds and institutional funds, but they fail in their fiduciary duty to correctly assess the default rates, or they deliberately lend to people or institutions who willingly go on to default. And this appears as very high cost of capital for enterprises that are truly deserving. So this is taxpayers' money, which is not being used efficiently. So why do we choose capital markets? Just to give you a perspective of the global economy, the Bitcoin economy, I mean Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all of the cryptocurrencies put together currently today are about $120 billion. And if you look at anything else, Apple's market share or market cap, $730 billion. You have the world stock markets at $67 trillion. So our crypto founders, while they have correctly identified currency as one of the sweeping, transformational, and revolutionary things, they have ignored, or they have not yet touched upon the real game changers of the world, which is sitting here. Gold market cap, stock markets, USD in circulation. $66 trillion compared to $120 billion. That's 500 of the attached to the blockchain technology, which can be displaced by the blockchain technology. So what is the problem? The problem is what I call the theory of opacity. Theory of opacity says wherever there is a huge opacity of processes, of systems in any industry, it attracts a lot of intermediaries, and the more there are the number of intermediaries, the more they can take away from the buyer and seller surplus in any industry. These intermediaries deliberately propagate further the opacity to cover their own interests. So opacity is bad. and transparency is good. Okay. And what does the cost of intermediaries mean? Just take a look at the stock markets and securities and how it affects, which is economic cooperation. It has pointed out that there is a tacit collusion between investment banks, and there is really high fees, exorbitant fees of 7 to 10% being charged by to the stock market. This is the bank. This is very familiar to me because half money their capital is at risk. This is just fee income which they generate out of pure advisory. This is on M&A, this is on IPO issuance, this is on bond issuance, and so on. So this is just the top 10 banks, and you can extrapolate this, which is $100 billion a year, which top 10 banks are making just on the advisory income, and you can extrapolate it to the thousands of, and there are so there are conflicts of interest because with clients on both sides. So for example, they have hedge funds on one side, pay fee income to banks, and like you and me, which are companies which go to banks for the initial. So they don't really have our interests in their mind. They cater to several masters. They don't know which master to pay loyalty to, and they're torn between their allegiances. So this theory of opacity, a lot of people may be thinking, well, investment banks have a role to play. They do. And this is because of information asymmetry. Do not involve seed capital. They believe that investment banks are able to better capture the value, or they're able to get a better pricing for their initial shares. They're able to build price tension in the marketplace, and they know the investors better. These kind of reasons. And like in the bank, you have economies of scale, and as you increase the capacity, investment banks also have economies of scale. As you manage a large number of investors, large number of capital issuance processes, you tend to accrue economies of scale. Therefore, it is more efficient for them to handle these processes and transactions than it is for you and me to do. So, if you are the goal, reputed and trusted, so they also offer the signaling. The real values that the intermediaries provide, but I still argue that this is disproportionately large to the charging, which is 10%. So, like for technology, first time in the history that actually and third party to approve or verify or validate. And it is not only true for currencies, it is true for any sort of a decision. And then we transfer the value, but it can also monitor, it can also enable and automate every process that is associated with the securities. For example, dividend distribution. For example, reporting the performance of a company. So this is a visual depiction of how DigiCamp works. On one source, that is a corporate entity or a government or a non-profit foundation or an individual wanting to raise money, trying to seek capital. And on the other side, you have investors like small investors. These are investment banks, hedge funds, pension funds, and so on. And being facilitated by is actually and these smart contracts can do. So now the securities issuance can be broken down into three phases. One is the pre-issue issuance. So before you issue a security, you need to directly arrive at the price. The opposite is once you arrive at the optimal price. Once you arrive at the price, you issue the securities in the second phase. Issuance of securities, actions, that's the issuance phase. And then after the issuance phase, in the post-issuance of securities, you have the dividend and coupon distribution and performance reporting and so on. And then can also be used for secondary trading of securities, not just for the primary issuance, but once the investors have these securities, they'll be able to trade this, buy and sell securities in the secondary market platform. So this is the DigiCamp architecture. So this is a breakdown of how, for example, a digital IPO process, really breaking down of the physical IPO process, making it into a smart contract enabled and automated process. So here is the problem. Between investors and issuers, there was leakage of the value, which is prevented by a digital, automated, smart contract enabled blockchain architecture. I'm going to give you a small story to drive home the point of why banks are charging exorbitant fees, which is not justified by the value they provide. So, for example, it's a company that wants to raise capital. Okay, they want capital and they believe they can issue equities and raise this money. So they go to and they say, we want to raise $100 million of money. So before they go to Goldman Sachs, banks. So all these ladies here are banks, and they are supposed to aim what will be the issue price, because it's not indicated. One will issue a securities, another says I will do it at $25. So guess what? I'll pick. I'm greedy, so I'll go with the bank that offers me a $25 issue price. And then I select this bank, next comes to the manager or issue manager. And then these banks go away from the scene. They receive and they're out of the game. The entire range of my process is in the hands of this single bank. And this bank proceeds to build an order book with investors, which are hedge funds. So each of these hedge funds saying, okay, I want to buy 100,000 shares of Paradise Inc. I want to buy 5,000 shares. I want to buy 1,000,000 shares and so on. And you do an algorithmic average. Having investors, which admittedly the company is not able to do right now because the company is to the investors. And then once there is an order book and the bank actually announces saying the issue price is now $16. And no, not the same as the $25 that the bank initially promised. There are 10 of shares, and these are the investors securities, and some of the not allocated securities. Paradise Inc. has no control over this whole process of who these investors are. Only the bank knows who these investors are, and the bank decides who gets what. And guess what? Here is a momentary for a company to interact and build relationships with the investors, becoming your shareholders. It's a very emotional moment. Using this opportunity and building the process and not so this whole box is written with opacity, and me as Paradise Inc. I have very little control and know about it. Everything is in the hands of the bank. So this is just a depiction of how investment banks and so me being a banker, I'm familiar with a lot of Chinese walls and so on, where of bank research and syndication and so on are separated, but then bank is a civil entity, so you can never completely get rid of the moral hazard issue. So here are the problems with the securities issues, which I already explained, and you've already seen the market opportunity. So if 10 banks are making $100 billion of fees, there's huge fees to be made, and just peer-to-peer lending, which is currently around $26 billion of size, is expected to be $1 trillion. So peer-to-peer lending is nothing but one entity providing capital to another entity which needs it in the form of a loan. So, and by the way, the architecture that I just described can work for any form of security and any form of capital. It does not need to be bonds, it can be syndicated loans, it can be treasuries issued by a government, and in fact, any form of security, like even equity crowdfunding that happens in a Kickstarter kind of a platform. So, this is just one example of a blockchain architecture I have taken from one of the consultants' white paper. So, the consultants are one of the savvy ones, and they take pride in saying that the technology and they've written white papers. They are on mandates by some of the big banks to actually radically transform the process. But this is their idea of how to radically transform the landscape. Nothing has changed here because everything is the same. It's just automated, and that's not realizing the full potential of technology. Blockchain technology is not here to digitize the existing infrastructure exactly in its technical architecture. right? Because that's not fully realizing the potential of blockchain. So my eureka moment came when I chanced upon this revenue equivalence theorem. And it is the contributor was one Nobel Prize winner called Vickrey, and you must be familiar with Vickrey in auctions. And he proposed that in an auction of any type, regardless of the type of the auction and regardless of the number of participants in an auction, whether it's a single buyer or two buyers or multiple buyers, the revenue that accrues to the seller at the equilibrium is the same, regardless of the type of the auction and regardless of the number of participants in the auction. This was truly groundbreaking, and this is not intuitive, this is not apparent and evident. This was remarkable, a gem of a discovery. And this extrapolated to the capital market simply says, if you remove the intermediaries, all the surplus that the intermediaries are eating today will simply be redirected to the issuers and the investors, which is the buyers and sellers. Because capital markets are an exchange, transaction is nothing but a two-sided dynamic auction model. So when I saw this, I said I was confident then that something of this nature will have a world-changing potential. And I came up with this idea of decentralized global capital markets platform. How it looks. So this is my artistic representation of the DigiCamp architecture. Here are investors, and these investors can be any retail investor or institutional investor. And on the other side, you have issuers. Issuer means anyone who issues a security. A security means an equity or a bond or a syndicated loan or a treasury. So an issuer is nothing but someone who seeks capital, an investor is nothing but someone who provides capital. And these two parties interact directly in a completely automated smart contract architecture, and the smart contract simply exchanges capital for the security at predetermined parameters, of course. So you can decide, how much you want to issue a security for, and if you determine the price, and if the price is fixed, then the investors can supply the demand for you. So the smart contract simply exchanges. To give you a real analogy that you can understand very easily, this is what happens in an ICO, right? In an ICO, someone is giving you the money, and you're giving them the token in return. So you can extend that philosophy to the real securities market, where investors are offering capital and they're getting securities in return. And here is where the capital is getting converted from fiat to digital, and on the other side as well. The only thing you require for the smart contract to function is the Oracle data feeds, and those can be anything that determine how the algorithm for the smart contract should function. Once again, so the real inspiration behind DigiCamp was the invention of the smart contract. Vitalik, of course, Nick Szabo and Sergio Lerner also came up with this concept of smart contracts earlier, but Vitalik was the first one to actually give life to smart contract by creating a Turing-complete program which can put together any smart contract and execute it. And his definition of smart contract is a mechanism where two parties can put together value and they can decide how the value will be distributed at a future point of time without knowing how that payoff is going to be at this point of time, and the future payoff will simply be determined by a set of factors, either an event or some determining outcomes. Future payoff. So multiple parties or two parties can put together value now, and these parties will get to divide the value at a future point of time, And the formula in which this gets divided is not known at this point. It is being determined by a future outcome, and that outcome can feed the data feeds through the Oracle data feeds that I earlier showed. Okay, a DGCamp, a definition, it's a blockchain and smart contract driven platform where issuers, whether it is public or private entities, governments, and non-profit institutions can access a broad range of investors, whether it's retail or institutional investors, and can automate a variety of transactions and processes such as book building, auctions, syndications, dividend distributions, and can issue a broad range of digital assets. The type, jurisdiction, liquidity, and risk profile can participate in this, and they can use this platform to discover investment opportunities across the globe, and they can directly invest in. And a secondary market layer with buyers, sellers, and arbitrageurs can complement this system. And this is a system where you do not need a single intermediary for this to function. So what are some of the benefits? Of course, cost saving, because if the banks are charging up to 10%, even if you reduce it to half or you charge 10% or 10% of what the banks are charging, which is 1%, you have saved a significant portion of GDP. You have made access to capital much more prevalent for deserving entrepreneurs and innovators everywhere. And especially we are seeing today, firms are emerging out of far remote corners of the earth, like Korea, like China, like Cambodia, like Africa, and so on. But capital is very scarce there. So in the blockchain and decentralized world, we are in a different paradigm where we are very lucky to be getting access to capital just because of our inventions and disruptions. So this is the profound thing that can intimidate a lot of existing incumbents, because such a system on any given day can perform the role of an exchange, like NASDAQ, for example, of an investment bank, like a Goldman Sachs, for example, when it comes to securities issuance, and everything a Kickstarter can do, because you can simply put your fund collection into a smart contract, and you can tell the smart contract, I want to raise this much. When the money hits this target, stop this fund gathering. And everything a peer-to-peer lending place can do. And so basically this is like a cooperative society, a peer-to-peer insurance or peer-to-peer funding place or peer-to-peer bank or peer-to-peer investment advisory and so on. And not only this, this can also spawn a lot of value providers, like due diligence providers, like people who can do regulation reports or risk reports and so on, and you will be able to access those reports and buy, and you do not have to pay the bank 10% fees for this whole opaque box. So we plan to come up with this capital coin. We haven't announced the ICO yet, but it will be sometime shortly, within the next few months. A non-profit foundation, because we believe that such a dramatically revolutionizing thing is a public good, and a for-profit company cannot actually be concerned about creating a public good and maintaining a public good, which also involves building the community worldwide and maintaining the protocol and improving the technical protocol and so on. So we believe that non-profit foundation is the best system for this. Okay, so we're moving onwards for the global tour, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to China and we're going to Europe and everywhere. So I'm trying to actually build a team. We're looking for a lot of blockchain developers, strategic partners, people who have knowledge of capital markets, and people who can merge the two, which is the blockchain technology and the capital markets. So the scarcity today is we have blockchain geniuses who understand everything about the protocols, and we have capital markets and financial services geniuses, but there is no overlap and there is no intersection. And which is why the investment banks and financial institutions are still thriving in their opacity. The moment there is an overlap of genius between the two, it's clear as sky that all the old existing systems are redundant and do not deserve to continue. Okay, we got featured in Asia Sentinel recently last week. This is our Dubai tour. We were just there 2 days ago. And we are going onwards to Shanghai, Hong Kong. And the beautiful thing is, Andhra Pradesh state government has expressed confidence in us, and they are our partners. And they have allowed us to build them a pilot for corporate bond issuance. Now the question is very elegant and dramatic and radical, but how do you actually bring this to life? Of course, there will be regulations, and all these investment banks and exchanges that operate today deal in because operate, and these licenses cost money, and these licenses are multi-jurisdictional. So we envisage going to each jurisdiction and acquiring this license. So the technology platform will actually compete with these physical financial institutions like exchanges and so on, and we'll be doing the same things that they do, and much more efficiently and elegantly. It's not that the technology was lost on either exchanges or investment banks. In fact, exchanges were the first to wake up to the potential of blockchain, because as early as in 2013, NASDAQ invested $30 million in a startup called Chain, and they actually did a pilot for how to issue private securities. And exchanges are in this big game of global domination. To give you an idea, NASDAQ actually bid for a Swedish stock exchange called OMX Global, and the bid price was $3.7 billion. And if that merger had gone through, the NASDAQ and the OMX, they would have together controlled $5.5 trillion of securities and 5,000 companies across several countries. And that just gives you an example of the power these exchanges hold. So if you control $5.5 trillion out of the $66 trillion of the worldwide securities industry, you're already controlling 10%. That's a large concentration of power in the hands of one exchange. And that is a centralized exchange. Imagine what benefits would accrue to you and me if this whole thing were to be decentralized, if there was not a single monopoly or a centralized exchange controlling the fate of how much companies ought to pay, when do they go to the public markets, and how much it costs them to even access the public. Because the moment there is a platform, you not only have a technology that can automate all these processes, you also have the investors. Because the moment you have a platform, it's a two-sided one of issuance to get the investors onto the other side. There will be, of course, a lot of people wanting to raise capital, but you see the example of ICOs. I mean, is there really a challenge in accessing the ICO subscribers? Not really. Actually, the demand far exceeds the supply, and this is one of the anomalies we are seeing uniquely in the blockchain history, that demand far exceeds supply for the first time for any capital seeker. So that's something that is probably not going to be commonplace or commonly experienced. Okay, that means you've had enough of my talk. Okay, I take the cue. Okay, that's a long story about what I did. Okay, so National Payments Corporation of India, that's one of the truly disruptive organizations, because they have come up with a payments innovation that no country has yet seen. And ironically, it has come from an institution that is associated with the government, and their innovation is something called UPI, Unified Payments Interface. And it is so disruptive that anytime you want a payment to go either to another peer or to a utility or anything you want to pay to someone, it directly debits your account without the requirement of any card. Like, you don't need to use Visa, wallet. You don't have the existing intermediaries. The only thing you need is a bank account, and it directly debits your account, and the money goes to the beneficiary, and there is no fees after this is. And this is not there in any of the developed countries. It has come from India and it has come from NTCI. And the CEO of NTCI was very impressed with the idea of DigiCamp, and they have promised research support and they want to be our partners and work together. And that's the Andhra Pradesh government. And the government has put its weight behind us, saying, okay, we want to let you build a pilot for us for the bond issuance. Now for regulation, of course, regulation will be, because as of now, only the Delaware state in the United States has come up with actually a law. It has passed a law to say that corporates can indeed issue securities on blockchain, and it has even said there will be no liabilities accruing to any parties that use blockchain for the issuance of securities. So that's the kind of law we need in every jurisdiction. It will take some time, but someone has taken the pioneering role and shown some leadership, and the other jurisdictions will follow. Maybe not immediately, but in some time. Okay. So I'm going to end this here, and we'll take any questions if you have. Thank you. I'll just let David speak, and then we're going to sit here for the questions. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Aretha. If you just give me a second, I'll switch computers.
While David sets up, I just want to leave you with one last thing. So the magic of Satoshi Nakamoto, or the gift that he gave us, is not some faster, simpler, more efficient, or something else. The gift that he gave us is decentralization. He put the power of decentralization in our hands, and to truly benefit from this technology, we have to leverage decentralization. That is when the common man, people like you and me, will benefit. Anything else that any bank does, or anything else that a consultant does, or any technology that helps the incumbents improve their processes, their bottom line, it does not affect you and me at all. It affects us nil. So the only way the blockchain technology can affect us is if we take the power of decentralization into our hands and remove the intermediaries. So we hope that we go at least partially on the way to complete decentralization, if not fully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aretha. Okay, let's just see who we have in the audience tonight. How many people, put your hands up if you own Bitcoin? I must admit, I thought there'd be more. What about Ethereum? More people own Ethereum than Bitcoin, that's interesting. Other coins which aren't Ethereum or Bitcoin? Okay, interesting. And who buys and sells them? Okay. Who's familiar with the expression Lamborghinis on Mars? No? Okay, so maybe not so many traders, but obviously. Okay. Well, I'm speaking Asian headquarters in Singapore. We're a bunch of old guys and girls like myself. And we didn't have to think very long and hard about where to put our Asian headquarters. We've been in global businesses before, and it was a no-brainer to choose Singapore. So we will be looking to set up an office, create companies, hire, develop, and all that. Okay, so Sweetbridge. This is a slide with a picture of a bridge on it. and it's a bridge. There has to be a better way. So we're working in the supply chain and trying to use blockchain technology to improve how the supply chain works. So we're a blockchain alliance for a liquid supply chain. Now, we're a not-for-profit Swiss foundation. 10% of everything we get actually goes to charitable purposes by our foundation deeds. But we're an alliance. I think in the new Web 3.0 world, they don't look to completely dominate one area at the expense of all other participants. Arifa talked a lot about what Vitalik gave everyone in terms of Ethereum. The thing to remember is that this is open source, it's public code, variable ledger and database, and other things too. Requires people to think more openly, and instead of developing software in your own cupboard, in your own time, and saying, "Oh, this is mine and it isn't anyone else's and it belongs to me," it's more about collaborating with other companies. And I think you see that across the new Web 3.0 providers, especially in Ethereum. Many of them are working together, and indeed that would include ourselves. Okay, so what are supply chains? Singapore is a very big port, and most people think of this when they think of a supply chain. They think of a huge container ship with lots of containers on it, which is part of the supply chain, but it's more than that. All the clothes you're wearing, the chair you're sitting on, the carpet, this material here, the wall behind it, it was either supplied by Mother Nature locally, or it came here via a supply chain. There is no avoiding it. There's a huge amount of goods coming in and out through a supply chain. So that is $54 trillion of GDP. So if you weren't paying attention to the last slide about the size of the banks and fintech solutions, it's interesting to know that this is actually bigger than the banking industry. The banking industry really just takes care of the money for the people doing the real business. So this $54 trillion business of the supply chain is actually bigger than that. So it's an enormous opportunity. So how do we make that liquid? How do we get access to that money that's tied up there? We've developed a protocol stack. And if there's any developers in the audience, they know that you need a stack, and you can't do without that. So this is our protocol stack, and we're going to talk tonight about liquidity. I'll just talk you through some of these. The liquidity part of the stack provides liquidity to the goods in the supply chain and the money that's tied up in that. Moving up from that, there'll be a settlement protocol, which will allow fast and easy settlement. We're actually working today with a Vietnamese rice producer who wants to sell rice to Argentina. But just the settlement of that whole activity costs him 20% of the entire deal, just to get the money from Vietnam to Argentina. And that's why we're saying there has to be a better way. If we could make a way of doing that settlement much cheaper and faster, and without all that friction, which is really being paid by the smallest and least able to financially defend themselves participants in the blockchain. Okay, do we have any accountants in the audience? No accountants. Go on. Okay, excellent. I'm an accountant myself. And it's the boring thing that people have to do. You actually have to do it. There's a lot of other stuff. I should have asked first, are there any people from banks in the audience? Okay, so we've got a few working in there. I thought you were going to throw rotten tomatoes and maybe not. You're very open-minded. So the accounting platform, blockchain, and I don't know if you've heard of something called double entry bookkeeping. So there's no, everybody's heard of double entry bookkeeping, but nobody's interested in it. Separate accounting. But there's actually now something called triple entry bookkeeping. Previously you had double entry, but now with the blockchain you have a third triple entry up in the cloud to keep a record of everything. So if there's a disagreement between person 1 and person 2, you can go to the blockchain, verify what actually happened. And that is a huge advantage. The protocol will allow accounting for transactions in the blockchain to happen a lot faster, and also give that essential record. And at the moment, if you try to get credit in the supply chain, invoice discounting or factoring or anything like that, you know you'll lose 20% of your invoice value or asset value just trying to get some credit score based on a weekly and some other crazy method for deciding that you're actually bad credit and you can't lend to you. So that, you know, currently it's very difficult. Imagine if every single transaction that you ever made on the supply chain, whether you paid on time, whether you paid on full, whether you supplied the goods, is all available on the blockchain. And accounting for that becomes really easy. And knowing whether someone pays on time or not is transparent. It's actually there. Excuse me. Okay, so that's the accounting layer. Come back here. Okay, there we go. So that's the accounting layer, and we're not interested in accounting, and we're not accountants, so we pay less. So we'll move on. Okay, resource sharing. This will be something which is slightly more intangible, but basically the figures are that 70% of the logistics and supply chain assets, and I should have asked, hands up if you work in the supply chain or logistics industry. And if you're one or two. Okay, well, 70% of those assets are underutilized for 75% of the time. DHL do not want to give their space to UPS because they're trying to win and kill UPS. They don't want to play nice with them. So the result of that is that there's a huge amount of underutilized space and equipment every day, every truck, every container. Enormous opportunity. Using the sharing of that resource will hugely increase efficiency and help manage risk. If you think of the risk management, of course there's risk in settlement, there's risk in liquidity, risk in accounting for something correctly or not, and there's risk in sharing your assets. But with the protocol developed correctly, you can get effective risk management. The last one here you can't actually read is liquid talent optimization. Now, I know Grab Taxi is very big here, and I'm guessing almost every single person in the room will use Uber and Grab Taxi. Has anyone never used an Uber or a Grab Taxi in Singapore? No, I didn't think so. So, okay, so imagine Uber was a protocol between you and the taxi driver, and it wasn't controlled by Big Brother in the control room deciding on the subsidies, discounting fares, putting fares up, and and manipulating all of that so that the investors and Uber shareholders, which is quite difficult to become an Uber shareholder, they're getting extremely rich and making a huge amount of money, while the guys driving the cabs are really just becoming minimum wage workers. And that Lexus they bought, which they thought they could turn into a cab service, the numbers they did was based on the discounted price. And guess what? They've stopped paying discount. So suddenly the numbers don't work for the guy who bought the new car who thought he could make it work as a taxi. So if you imagine Uber, but just as a protocol between the two parties to allow them to agree terms of trade and allow to agree how much a person pays and how much they make. And you don't have someone creaming all the profit off the top of that. You just have the two people dealing. How efficient that would be. That's what we're going to do for liquid talent. and optimization of that. And that will be initially in the supply chain, where to compete with Amazon and Walmart and all the new initiatives that come out. If you work in the supply chain, I know we had a couple of people here, you can read all the books and go to all the conferences you want. You probably don't have the skill set and the variety and experience required, and other huge companies innovating and changing things. Imagine if you could put your hands on a team of people who have exactly the experience you want and engage with them just for the time that you need them. Profit share based on the protocol on the blockchain to pay them out based on results and based on them actually achieving something for you. And I know that's a remote example, but I think you've seen that getting a degree and becoming a titled worker for a company is no longer a lifelong thing. There is no guarantee of full-time employment. There is no guarantee of forever. Your employer cannot guarantee you that they will need you next year, in 5 years, in 10 years. They're looking down the barrel of millions of computers, automation, blockchain innovation, and they're just doing the best they can. They don't know whether they need to get rid of 5,000 staff in order to remain competitive. They're a huge company. But that deal of, you get a degree and your employer hires you and says, well, it's not exactly the degree I wanted, it's not all the skills I wanted, I don't know if it were the skills I needed in the future, but I'll take a chance on this person. And you going in with the company and saying, well, instead of doing something else or learning other skills, I'll go with this company because it sounds good, and they'll look after me, right? They're going to take care of me and make sure everything's okay and employ me for the next 10 years. Well, as you probably noticed, those days are over, and we're heading for a gig economy, which, if we're not careful, will be a drive to the bottom to get as many people on minimum wage in the lowest cost countries in the world. With the advent of the internet, and especially blockchain and Web 3.0, we're going to be able to outsource absolutely everything. And if we're not careful, that it's just gone. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. So I guess the bottom line is, you've all heard of the gig economy. We all know what's happening with unitization, what's happening with outsourcing, and things going to the lowest common denominator, lowest price. Well, blockchain, persistent ledger, distributed ledger technology, all of that stuff means that's much easier to do than it was before. So that's happening whether you want it to or not. You can carry on hoping that your big company will succeed and automation won't take away loads of jobs. But in reality, optimization of liquid talent will be far more important. So we're trying to do this fairly, equitably, and to give more to the workers and more to the people producing the actual work. Imagine if you wrote a program or developed a piece of code, and every time that piece of code got used, you got a tiny bit of tokens. Instead of people just saying, well, thanks very much, we've got your code now, as the employer saying, oh, by the way, that piece of code that you developed, if you read your employment contract, that actually belongs to us. You don't own any of it, even though you developed it and it's your code and you did everything. So that's changing, and people are waking up to the fact that they can do things. If you're an Ethereum developer and programming Solidity, if you're not on a 6-figure salary, you will be very soon if you're paying attention. It's growing extremely fast, and people are earning huge amounts from open source architecture and freelancing to achieve those. Anyway, I've talked enough about that. That's what we're planning to do. So here's all our contributors. We've got 8 different countries. We have from China to Morocco to India to Canada, US to Switzerland, to Scotland, where I'm from. And you'll see we're mostly a bunch of old people. Sorry about that. You can use the word experience instead. But what our experience counts for, who knows? All you youngsters out there will be telling us, you know nothing pops. You know, that we're going to take over, and you probably are. But you know, there's some things you do learn from experience. So we're bringing between the top 5 people 100 years of supply chain and finance experience to this problem to try and provide liquidity in the supply chain and in other areas. So that's our group. We've actually got an extended group now with ex-Federal Reserve economists, double PhD mathematicians, and some very, very bright people, a lot brighter than me. Okay, so our alliance, these are not household names. You're not going to say, I know him. Well, who knows CoinFund? You don't know CoinFund? Okay. They're a very big blogger on the blockchain space. What about Arizona State University? Anyone? Oh my goodness, we might have an alumni from Arizona State. That's impressive. Well, what you might not know about Arizona State is we've partnered with them, and they are doing a blockchain degree, and they're going to have 2,000 students. They are the biggest university in the US. Biggest isn't always best, but they are the biggest, and they're doing a dedicated blockchain degree. They will have 2,000 blockchain developers in that course, which is quite incredible. The other surprising here, do we have any lawyers in the room? Just a couple, okay. So just see how many people I'm going to offend before I get started here. So the legal system today, this is a bunch called New Law US, you can Google them. It's a consortium of 400 lawyers trying to find a new way to do law. And they kind of came to the conclusion that the dynamic for law is wrong. You get paid for the hours that you spend doing the work. You don't get paid for the product. So for example, if I were to pay a lawyer, and I don't seem to have too many to choose from in the audience, but if I were to pay for advice on, let's say, whether my token ICO issuance was going to be a security or a commodity, and whether marketing it to the citizens of the island of Singapore, country of Singapore, would be legal or not, and would comply with all the regulations. A survey would be done, hours would be spent, I would get an invoice with fees, and you'd think, well, what's wrong with that? That's absolutely fine. But then if this young gentleman here came along and said he would like the same study, went to the same lawyers, they've already done the report, right? So they can just hand it to him and say, here you go, you get it for free. Is that how it works? Is that what would happen? Strangely, that's not what happens. The time gets spent, you might get it less, you might get it at a lower price, but you know what? If they just kept the same price, then more of it's profit, even though they've done the work already. Of course, there might be little differences, but most of the work's been done. So, there is really to charge for hours. These guys are changing it to put legal contracts on the blockchain and charge for product. And once it's there, you can use it. It will be unitized. It won't be each time. So they're trying to get away from working per hour and work per product. So I'm not going to talk about the other guys here. There's lots of different partners. So here we go. The big alliance. It's more than just a blockchain. We're actually covering these ecosystems, and I can tell you're getting tired here, but we're still a long way from those pizzas and that cold beer. So hang in there. The ecosystems we're looking at are supply chain. You've heard all about that. That's why there's a picture of the truck. This is a gavel. We're building, as I said, a law ecosystem. We've also got in our targets life sciences, tax and compliance. Do we have any taxmen in the audience tonight? Some fun facts about tax. Okay, no takers on that. Fair enough. Retail, financial services, high-tech manufacturing, and even more. So we're trying to spread the biggest possible alliance. And this is going to be very open. It's a not-for-profit Swiss foundation, and 10% of it goes to charitable projects. So we're trying to prove that we're not looking for complete world domination. We will partner with anyone, and if we have a better solution, we'll integrate it into ours. All that we ask is that you play nicely in the ecosystem. Okay, so here's that protocol stacked back. And if you notice, liquidity, I'm sure you were all paying attention, has moved from the bottom and it's now up the top and bigger. Okay? Something exciting is going to happen next. So there was only 3 people who said they worked in the supply chain here. So we'll keep this quick, but I think you all know about order to payment. And the fact that if you work for a very large company like DuPont, Caterpillar, Apple, whomever, then when your supplier delivers their goods, you take 60 days, 75 days, and go on, why not, 90 days to pay your supplier. Because what are they going to do, right? You're the mighty, huge Fortune 200 company, and they're some squiddly supplier who you can replace in an instant. So that's just how it works. So that money is all locked up. And in the same way, we've got wood stuff here going to a paper mill and going to what looks like a candy store, but paper shop. If this guy's got his goods, then he can pay the woodcutters and everyone can be happy, but no, there's 60 days, 75 days, 90 days. And that's because money costs money. You might be thinking, well, what's he talking about? Money costs money. Of course money costs money. Well, money is controlled by central banks. Central banks set interest rates. And unless you're lucky enough to live in Japan or Switzerland, where there's a negative interest rate for holding your money in the bank account, and it's a positive interest rate. So you get some very small percentages, but basically borrowing money within this cycle costs, up to 20%. Maybe from 3% to 12%, whatever it is. So there's a huge amount of money tied up in there. Estimated at $75 trillion, the amount tied up at any one time in there, which none of these guys can access. You use traditional methods, but you may lose 20% discount in your invoice factor. So we are going to talk about to the coins. Now, I don't know if you see what's happened here, but this is sweet and this is bridge, and we're called sweet bridge, so kind of probably should have another way about, but you can see that there. Yeah, okay. So this is probably the most boring alternative currency coin you will ever come across. It's not going to do anything. It is going to stick like glue to the fiat currency it's tied to. We're going to start with the rich coin dollar, US dollar. We may have a rich coin Singapore dollar, a euro, Swiss franc, all these things. So this allows that guy in Vietnam to deal directly with the guy in Argentina without talking about US trade controls, without worrying about how to change his money, without worrying what price for keeping these things against dongs, against Argentinian pesos. It's going to be kept at stable value, reduces that exchange risk, and it's for B2B payments. We're essentially a business-to-business company. So you might be saying, well, hold on a minute, a stable coin? Are you nuts? Have you looked at any of these charts? Every time you go to bed at night, you wake up in the morning and your personal crypto portfolio is going woo, up and down, and you have no idea where it's gone every day. Frank Sinatra said, New York, the city that never sleeps. Cryptocurrency trading doesn't take a break. The market doesn't close. No one ever stops selling and buying these things. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So how on earth are you going to make this currency stable? Well, that's why we've hired ex-Federal Reserve economists and also advisors in economics and double PhD math out a tethering mechanism to make this possibly the most boring cryptocurrency ever. When you buy it, it's not going to go whoosh to the moon. It's going to stay there, and it's really an alternative to dealing in fiat currency, which is currently regulated, restricted, and controlled, as you know. Okay, now, where are those Lamborghinis located? Coin sign, control coin, which will float and can go down as well as up. But it will be more interesting from a speculative point of view and more risky. This is not investment advice. you're going to borrow more money with it. You're going to pay zero interest, because we're not interested in making the interest. When you buy our coin for Bridgecoin, we're not going to invest it. We're going to keep paying fiat. Part of the deal is if you're giving us fiat for a coin, sorry to switch back to Bridgecoin here, but if you're giving us fiat, then we don't expect us to go to Las Vegas with it. I'm sure you're aware of Basel III and the other regulations about marginal reserve lending. Any bank are not so sure. So if you give over 100 Sing dollars to your bank, okay, how much do you think the bank can go to Las Vegas with, and how much do you think the bank has to keep in a safe at the back of the bank in stuff they can put their hands on? 1090. Okay, someone's done their homework. Is that the official percentage? That's the Alex. Okay. So the point is, that means they're only actually obliged to keep and competitively push to this lowest amount. That 10%, 1090, so let's call it 11% would be fair. So they keep 11%, but the other 89%, they're off to Las Vegas gambling with it. And if you've watched It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, an old black and white Christmas movie, if you haven't watched it, you should. Very good movie. But in that story, Jimmy Stewart is playing in the snow and all the rest of it, and there's a run on the bank, and of course the bank hasn't got the money to pay out all the people who put the money in. So that's the fractional reserve lending part. So we're not going to do that. We're going to keep a one-to-one correspondence between the bridge coins we issue and the fiat that we have pegging it. So we're not going to Las Vegas, we don't intend to make any interest off it. We're just going to hold it so that you can do business in that coin and not worry about it. Sweet coin is going to help you borrow more, pay less interest. It'll give you free settlement bus, and it's free to change it. If you put it up there, it's free to change out crypto and back again. There'll be no charges. I don't know how you buy coin in Singapore. It's Coinbase for most places, but you'll probably have one place that you go to buy it. And it's going to cost you 3%, 5%, 10%? 3%. Okay. So 3%. It'd be really good if you didn't have to pay 3%, and we're offering that in terms of our coins. Okay, so in cryptography, and I'm guessing we've got too many cryptographers in the audience tonight. Nope. Got one. Excellent. Cryptography, we always talk about Alice and Bob. Okay, that's tradition. We can't do that. So Bob's missing from this, but we do have Alice. And Alice has invested $10,000 and bought 50 Ethereum, a market price of 200 each. Now you can see just how old this slide is by the price of Ethereum. Despite what's happened with China and Hong Kong and all the negative press, somehow we're still up at $4,500 for a Bitcoin today. It's like, it's not going away. You might wish that it went away. You might be hoping that it goes away, but it's not going anywhere. As a speculative prospect, it seems to still be very strong. So anyway, Alice has bought her 10,000, and she gets 50F just to make this easy at 200. Okay. So let's see what happens next. I'm sure you can hardly wait. Okay, she deposits her 50 Ethereum into a Sweetbridge fund account. This is like a vault. Here, she's using 50 Ethereum, and she's allowed to borrow 5,000 Bridgecoin. Bridgecoin's tethered to US dollar 1-for-1. So we set that percentage at 50. That'll be a dynamic percentage, set on lots of things, and if it's rare peppy coin or butt coin or something, it won't be 50%. The Ethereum might not be as high as 50%, it might be lower. But you're basically allowed to borrow, and locking your Ethereum into the vault, you can borrow 5,000 Bridgecoin, equivalent to $5,000. So what do we mean by locking it in the vault? Well, what we mean is you can't spend it anywhere else. You can't transfer it. It's programmatically locked in there. We're not going to take it and go to Vegas. We're just leaving it in there as your collateral. You're collateralizing it. Okay, so what can Alice do? Well, So you might want to spend it on groceries. Just exchanges are 5,000 Bitcoin, but I'm guessing you'll have heard about the 2 pizzas that were bought in 2010 for each. You know that? So the guy who bought them, one person, okay, so the guy who bought them paid 5,000 Bitcoin for them, which at the time was $5 or something. Which seemed like a good deal at the time for these magic beans. You've got 2 fresh pizzas delivered to his door. If he held on to them, I don't know how many mental mathematicians there are in the crowd, those Bitcoins would now be worth $22.5 million. So he bought 2 pizzas at $22.5 million each. That's a kind of ouch. You know, how good are those pizzas tasting right now? You know? Anyway, so the point is most people don't want to spend crypto, they want to hold it. So we can buy groceries or equipment with that. Alice could use her 5,000 Bridgecoin to buy another cryptocurrency, and in this case, she's used the 5,000 to buy 1.2 Bitcoin. Which wouldn't, well, it's almost right now, it's almost right. So she's now still got her Ethereum locked in the vault, and she's got some Bitcoin. See what happens next. Okay, when Ethereum price increases, of course, it's always increasing, but we do know it will go down, and it can go down, and it has gone down, and it may do it anyhow. But let's see it has gone from up to 300. She can either repay Bridgecoin to her vault, or instruct the vault to sell a small portion of her Ethereum on the market to repay the liability. So if you think about just what happens here, Alice was able to borrow from her Ether account without having to sell it, and that led her to a $5,000 profit. So she got profit on Bitcoin and profit on Ethereum at the same time, without having to sell her Ethereum. So if you imagine Alice is a business with 1.5 million locked up in assets to use as collateral, just imagine how much you could get out of locking that stuff. You don't need lawyers, you don't need contracts, or you need smart contracts. But by locking an asset onto the blockchain, you've got programmatically controlled, independently verifiable, cryptographically secure method of collateralizing these things and borrowing against them. Just think about that. This is our beta app, on mobile here, allowing people to lend themselves money interest-free without another party. So it's be your own bank, is another way of looking at that. It's your money, you lock it on the blockchain, and then you can do things against it. And with that, I'll finish up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your patience. We have the pleasure of introducing BritBlock to you. BritBlock comes from Germany, and BritBlock is about tokenizing any assets, whether it is real estate, whether it is digital assets like a security, or a stock, or a bond. So basically, any security that you deal with in the real world, or any asset that you deal with in the real world, you can tokenize it, and you can benefit from the dividends or whatever is associated with the real asset in the form of token. So this allows us to completely tokenize the entire portfolio of your securities, and it enables efficient distribution of the dividends and coupons and whatever is associated with the asset. It enables atomic divisions of the asset. For example, if you own a real estate like a home, it enables you to divide the home into as many parts as you want and tokenize it and distribute the ownership. So apply this to any field. It means practically you can divide any asset into as many number of owners, as many number of units. It means you can inject liquidity into the system. It means you can finance this by doing the inventory, and you can collateralize. So basically you can do all sorts of stuff. So blockchain is a big enabler. So Max is here with us today to describe the innovation more.
We should start the aircraft.
What?
It's pretty cool.
Okay, first of all, thanks Rita for introducing me. I'm Max from Brickblock from Berlin, Germany. Brickblock, in short, we're doing this very quick now because I'm getting hungry for this pizza. Brickblock, in short, is the future of asset trading on the blockchain, and that's it. Thank you very much for that. I'm kidding. Essentially, what we are doing is, or what we did was we took a look at the current financial ecosystem and analyzed a couple of issues with them and how blockchain can change them. And the way we're doing this today is we're taking a very quick look at one of the most industry-standard e-wallets. An e-wallet is the thing you use when you log into your online banking interface. This is like one of the most standard options. Many banks are using this. It's a white label solution, so it could be that your personal bank is usually using the same solution. They took the freedom of outlining several different components of this wallet in this really nice pictogram. And we're beginning with information security. I don't think we have to talk about it. It's quite clear, it's obvious. The blockchain is by far the most secure way. We currently know how to store data digitally. It is fully encrypted, so you can completely skip this part from this wallet. Next part is KYC, know your customer, one of the most important aspects of any financial institution. So any financial institution needs to verify that the person who's using the bank account is actually the person registered. And currently it's done, either you go into the bank, you show your passport, you register, and so on, you sign up. It takes about an hour, very annoying. With the newer banks, with the challenger banks, we have online verification systems, kind of similar like a Skype call, like a video call. You should be simply show your passport. But still, there's a problem with this because you have multiple identities for one person. So each time you sign up, your data might have changed. You might have a new address, you might have a new telephone number, and there are different online identities in existence because you don't really go through each individual financial institutions and let them know, okay, yeah, I just moved. So the way this can be easily changed and the way it's already been done by IBM is by utilizing the blockchain and simply getting one identity, and you are the private key for your identity. You are the only one that is able to share your identity with the individual parties, and you can update it. It's a very secure method of storing your data, and it's unalterable. Next one on this list is transaction processing, and that's actually still a huge issue within the blockchain ecospace. So currently, the Bitcoin blockchain processes around 3 to 4 transactions per second. And in contrast to PayPal, which processes 1,600 transactions per second, or Visa or MasterCard, which can process up to 50,000 transactions per second, that's literally nothing. So there are a couple of workarounds. Ethereum was supposed to release rating in March this year. So far, we haven't heard anything from that. With rating, theoretically, it would be possible to process up to 1 million transactions per second. Nevertheless, we haven't heard anything from the developers since February, so let's see what's coming there. Strong tendency to move off-chain, to do a lot of side channels, which could increase the transaction size as well. Next point on the list is risk management. So this is actually one of the things. Like most people that have heard of Bitcoin or read about it in the media, heard of it in a very, very bad light. So either used for gambling, for buying drugs, for buying weapons or whatever in the darknet. Bitcoin has this notion of being anonymous and the currency of the terrorists and so on and so on. But this is actually not true. With Bitcoin, it's much easier to follow through financial schemes. This goes so far that the CIA actually said, okay, this is a great invention, it makes life for us a lot easier. We can follow financial schemes a lot better than with our current systems, with SWIFT or Sept in Europe. And there are already a couple of companies doing this. One of the biggest is Chainalyzers. They simply analyze the Bitcoin and they can see, okay, these Bitcoin have been used in the darknet. And if this user has a lot of Bitcoins that were used in the darknet, we can assume, okay, this guy is somehow dodgy. We would probably report it to the financial authorities, which goes hand in hand with the next part, reporting, so we can skip that. Bank integration, clearing and settlement, or SEPA. So that's also not a big issue on the blockchain. We have one of the best systems to transfer value internationally, decentralized, so we can always do this. White labeling, also not so much important, again, we already spoke about it a little bit. Most of the community or most of the blockchain ecosystem develops completely open source, so the core code is available for anyone to use and to replicate. Yeah, accounting and billing, David spoke about it a little bit as well. We can skip that, it's really boring anyways. Only thing that is quite interesting is access channels. Interesting in the sense that we don't believe that there will be like this one main blockchain that solves all of our issues. So Ethereum is not the golden blockchain. There will be multiple blockchains, and these blockchains need to communicate among each other. There will be private blockchains for individual corporations and so on and so on. But this is also already being developed by Parity. Parity is founded by Dr. Gavin Wood, who is also one of the co-founders of Ethereum. He is currently working on a project called Polkadot, and that simply enables the communication among different blockchains. So let's move onwards and take a look at the traditional asset trading market. First of all, if you invest into more traditional investment options such as exchange traded funds or real estate funds, it's usually quite illiquid, so it's really difficult to get in or out. There could be very high risk involved depending on the fund performance, and very high entry barriers. So if you don't, like for many exchange traded funds, you have a minimum investment of, let's say, for instance, 100,000 euros. So we are basically including a large part of our population from taking part in this financial industry. From the other side, from the fund manager side, it's also similar. He also has a lot of issues in the current system. So if he sells his product over a bank, he loses a lot of money to the banks because they are selling his products. Also, for smaller funds that are not listed on the bank, it's even more difficult because they have to sell their products on their own, which are even higher costs, and they have a complete lack of access to the global market. So at BrickBlock, we're pretty much solving this all. I will begin by talking a bit about our team. So this is our CXX level. Jacob, he has a background in real estate. He used to develop several housing projects in Berlin and Leipzig in Germany. And at a certain stage, he was in the right place at the right time. He was quite successful. He wanted to set up his own real estate fund and noticed the many problems that are occurring while doing so. So he went to his long friend Martin, with very long experience in the blockchain business. He was running I think probably even the first Bitcoin startups within Germany called the Waldorf still in existence. They are by far the largest of, yeah, I think B2C that is focused on the blockchain or Bitcoin market. And he also co-founded Transistor Co-working, which is Germany's largest fintech co-working space, and Bitcoin Berlin, which is Germany's largest Bitcoin incubator. Next to Martin is Philip. Philip has background at McKinsey, leading cloud developers, and Marius, who's our lead developer, he used to work for Qubit and Coinbase. So essentially, what all of these new solutions for the traditional market have in common are they are solving one of these problems. Either they make a product, a financial product, or anything more accessible to a wider market, or they make it easier to use, more convenient to use it, it's less hassle for the person, or they make it a lot cheaper, so it's more cost efficient to use this. And this is exactly what we're doing as well with the traditional asset management. Syndicate funds, they simply enable institutional investors or individual investors to invest in a broad range of cryptocurrencies. So let's say the top 30 cryptocurrencies with one click, without downloading each wallet, without loading private keys for each currency. So it's a lot more convenient for them to invest. And the last one are exchange traded funds. I don't know, are you familiar with what exchange traded funds are? So let's take a look at the real estate. What here is the so in total for all the steps. So market would supposed to do research project, select the middleman, go to the notary, complete your